and welcome to episode 51 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 26th of November 2018. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Hello.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Yes, we're all back together again. I think we were missing you, Will, last time, weren't we? I hope you've recovered from your man flu.
I have, thank you.
Good to hear. Right, well, let's crack straight on with the news and some sort of Nvidia and KDE-based shit from you, Phelim, as usual.
Well, about 3 hours prior to this news story hitting, I bought myself an AMD RX 580 graphics card. So this is quite ironic and annoying, but there we go. I'm enjoying it, so it's good. But yeah, Nvidia have finally decided to contribute to KWin to get their EGL streams in. They had previously a bunch of patches that were on the GNOME side, and this is to get Wayland working. And the KDE developers were very reluctant to actually do all the work themselves because they didn't want to have to then maintain it. So that the Nvidia developers got in touch on the mailing list and said, yeah, they're prepared to do the work. And they were asked if they were prepared to maintain it afterwards, and they said they would. So maybe things are looking a bit more up in the Wayland Nvidia world for KWin.
Are we talking about the free software driver or the blob?
It's the blob, or the sort of back-end link to KWin. So how it all low-level ties in, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, graphics, you know, that's not text, so I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah. So it's for the pragmatic people then?
It is for the pragmatic people, yeah. I believe the Nouveau thing kind of ties in probably because it's something to do with memory handling and linking APIs together using GBM and, oh yeah, I don't know. It's all magic and voodoo, who cares? But the main thing is your NVIDIA graphics card might actually start performing a bit better and actually work under Wayland as opposed to going to X11 fallback mode is what would happen right now. So, I mean, that's good. But I guess we have to kind of see how they go on with it because they did have the new memory allocator they were trying to lead with some of the various other people. And NVIDIA kind of haven't got anywhere with that. They said they were going to finish it off in 2018, but that never happened. So, yeah, I mean, fingers crossed.
It's nice to see them show willing. And who knows, you know, there may be a load of NVIDIA cards flooding the market with the end of Bitcoin.
That's not the end. It's just a sale.
How many 1,000% increase do you need to get your prediction right for last year?
Fuck off. But honestly, it's just cheap at the moment. Now's the time to buy, I'm telling you. Buy.
Hodl.
Yeah. What is it, like 3,000 now or something?
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's dropped significantly, but you never know, it might get to 100,000 by the end of the year. If enough people buy. But you're right, actually, that there might well be a lot of graphics cards now because it's just not really economically viable because people weren't mining Bitcoin, of course. They were mining other altcoins or whatever and then selling them to trade up to Bitcoin. But now the whole market is somewhat collapsed. You might be able to pick up relatively cheap, like 1080s or whatever, so...
Yeah, I've got a 1080 and it's a wonderful card. I mean, I don't think anyone buys an NVIDIA card for the moral imperative. So,
yeah. Oh, so you're looking forward to this actually improving your experience then?
Well, I'd kind of resigned myself to always having to use X11 for as long as I have this card, which hopefully would be for a long time. So, yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great if I could switch to Wayland at some point. It's
not the only KDE story that's in here, though. I presume this is you as well, Phelim, then. Something about accessibility.
It might have been Graham, but no, it was actually me. Yeah, libq accessibility client version 03.0 has been kicked off. So they're finally getting a bit more of work done on this. They set up a fabricator page for it, which is the KDE source control management project planning type of system. And they have about 27-ish tickets up there so far, and there's about 4 users that are working on it, and the main areas all seem to be the focus of finding stuff on the screen or where it defaults to, keyboard navigation missing, and labels for the A11i standard, which must be the accessibility version of the translation one.
It's A11y is accessibility. It's like Kubernetes is K8s. It's like you just take out the number of letters in the middle.
Okay, we don't have personalized reg in our cars over here, so I don't have that skill that people have where they just go, oh, it obviously means that. It's like, right, okay.
Have you never heard of that before, though?
I have never heard that before, but I think that's half the problem of this, is the fact that no one ever hears about the accessibility stuff or knows what to do with it. So this is good. And if there's at least 4 people doing it, and possibly more, then yeah, keep it going, because I think it's important, and maybe with not too much work and a good library, it might make it, sort of no-brainer to sort of stick it into your application.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Some of those tickets are really ambitious, like make Ocular accessible.
Yeah, I like that one. You feel that might be a sort of route ticket for many, many, many more.
Yeah, okay.
Because accessibility's traditionally not been very good in KDE, has it?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think some parts have been good and some parts have been bad. I mean, many of those things, for example, on the fabricated board are to do with making things keyboard navigable. And that's always frustrated me in KDE. Lots of parts of it are some great global shortcut configurations and gestures, but some parts frustratingly aren't.
Is that something you dedicate any time to with Ubuntu, Will, accessibility?
Not anymore. We rely on Upstream to do that, but we have done in the past with Unity 7 and in Unity 8 to a lesser degree, I suppose. But it's like a personal hot topic for me is making sure that accessibility is as good as it can be, because by and large, these are people who need these accessibility options, who probably would struggle to get their voice heard or reach out to the community and get involved in other projects. So I think it's something that everybody needs to take seriously, and it's really good to see people doing exactly that in KDE.
Yep, good stuff as usual then from KDE. Right, let's move on, and I wonder if Graham and Will are going to be a bit silent on this one. So Shuttleworth at the OpenStack Summit just randomly announced that Ubuntu 18.04 was going to get 10 years of support. And that has just left everyone saying, does that mean it's free for another 5 years after the standard 5 years? Or is that going to be part of the ESM that you have to pay shitloads of money for? Or what? And no one seems to have an answer. So, head on the chopping block, Will. What's going on?
Well, this is an interesting development. The reason that it's come about is because people like the financial industry and telcos all have these very long-lived projects, and in some cases they have to have this long-term, very long-term support, I suppose, of 10 years. So it's definitely going to be interesting to those guys, and more information will be forthcoming from Canonical.
Politician's answer, nice. So, yeah, it sounds like it's not official yet and you're not going to give us a scoop, which is fair enough. It seems pretty obvious to me that it will be paid for. There's no way that Canonical are going to foot the bill for supporting another 5 years. I mean, 5 years is enough already. That must be very expensive when you start getting into kernels and stuff like that. So it would be shocking to me if it was free. And I did actually speak to someone who works for Canonical, who shall remain anonymous, who spoke to Shuttleworth about this very shortly after he had made that announcement. And he said it was ESM, but now apparently that is not the official policy yet. And this contact of mine told me that it's going to be announced officially shortly. So hopefully by the next time we record, we'll know. But, I mean, come on, it's pretty obviously going to be paid for, isn't it? And you say telcos and stuff like that and banking. Really, this is to compete with Red Hat. I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Red Hat offers about 10 years, and now Canonical's going to offer that with Ubuntu.
The only thing, though, that Red Hat does is it doesn't release every 2 years.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine, by the end of that support cycle, there's 4 extra LTSs potentially being released in between that. I hope they're not going to do that and do it like on the third one after that, like the 2024. Would that be correct? No, wait. 2026. Jeez, I can't do maths.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2026. Yeah. Jesus.
Because the thing is that 12.04 is still supported if you're willing to pay.
Yeah.
And that is like, what, at this point, 3 years? No, hang on. No, a year and a bit. out of support.
Watch us do time maths.
I know.
So is Windows XP by the British government.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft are still supporting it, aren't they? For the right price. So it does beg the question as to whether this is just going to be 1804. I mean, that's all we know at this stage. I'm sure that you know this and are not going to tell us this, but when this announcement comes, I really hope that is going to be clarified. What's going on with 1404 and 1604 as well, and also what's going to happen with 2004, which is not that far away in terms of, well, I suppose it's quite far away, but, you know, in terms of enterprise, it's not that far away. People will be planning for that now, I would have thought. So I really, really hope all of that gets cleared up. But yeah, I suppose we'll just have to wait, you tight-lipped bastard.
Watch this space.
Well, speaking of Red Hat, they have released their RHEL 8, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 beta. And it's funny that it's got quite a lot of features from Fedora, which is not that funny because Fedora is the upstream for it, but they've renamed them all so that people think they should actually bother paying for it.
Genuine article.
Yeah. Like specifically the alternatives to snaps, which they're calling application streams this time round. And I said it when I spoke to Chris about this. It does feel very different, doesn't it? This RHEL 8 versus 7. A lot has happened in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, some of the parts were, I don't know, often with a Red Hat release, you feel like the leaps are so big that so much changes in between that it was really getting long in the tooth by the time the next one came along, because you're trying to support those larger enterprise clients who, you know, might be a bank or whatever, and they just don't want to move quickly. So you have to try and drag people along. But a lot of the stuff in this looks like they were holding back, and they've suddenly had the floodgates released because there's a lot of new things like the networking driver stack stuff. That actually looks really cool. And some of the security stuff that, well, just by the nature of the new versions of SSL coming out, TLS, that they have to do those sort of things and they have to plan for the fact that this could be, you know, another 10 years before they actually get to take it offline. So it must be a nightmare to try and plan that type of stuff, which I'm sure Canonical will find out soon.
Do you ever have to deal with Red Hat in the wild then as part of your job, or is it all just Ubuntu these days?
No, there is still some Red Hat stuff that I'd use, yeah. But a higher proportion of it is Ubuntu, yeah. And
is that all 7 or is it even earlier?
Oh, it's even earlier, yeah. Well, and I won't go into how early some of it is, and that's the end of that particular question. And obviously it's the extended support release stuff. Yeah, it's not CentOS.
Yeah, yeah, they're definitely paying. Yeah.
Sure. All right, then, carry on. The one thing that I'm quite interested in is Stratus. And now I kind of caught me surprised that this is actually going to be in the beta, which is an interesting concept for people who aren't able to or don't want to use ZFS or ButterFS, which Red Hat has done to neither. So I'm kind of interested to test that out. So I'm going to try and get myself a beta release or try even the Fedora version of it if I can, just to see how that goes. Because it would be nice to have something in kernel and fully supported as opposed to, you know, out of tree or something that people just continually whinge about, even though they're wrong with ButterFS. So Stratus looks quite interesting.
It does look very interesting. It's a bit early though, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm surprised it's there. But as far as I thought, it was just a kind of an R&D type thing. But all of a sudden, it's there and ready to test out. So, I mean, maybe it'll go before the final release. But yeah, interesting to see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Although the thing is that as it is going to be about 10 years of support, and this is very much the future of storage as far as Red Hat are concerned, because they're just not interested in going down the ZFS route, are they? They just think that they just don't want to take the risk with the licensing. So they had to come up with this Stratus thing. So maybe they will put it in and maybe they'll just sort of caveat it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe wait for the point release fixes to upgrade features. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Rare that they would do that, mind you. But
yeah. But what about Cockpit, though? They're not calling it that. They're calling it Red Hat Enterprise Linux Web Console. I hear very good things about it, especially if you're going to be managing several servers. Have you ever tried that?
I have never tried it, but it sounds terrible. Why are you not using SSH? Shocking.
So only noobs use GUIs of any description is what you're trying to say there.
Oh, well, if you do have one, it should be in your centralized repository where you're pushing things out across your entire fleet. in a horrible case of YAML where you've typoed it and you just want to kill yourself at the end of it. But no, otherwise I don't use a GUI on a server. It's just webmin. That it just brings up horrible feelings of crappy configs sprawling everywhere. You never know if you have the module installed and all this. I am sure Cockpit's done way better. It's kind of, you get a bad taste for it. You're just not going to go back and try it again. But maybe I should.
Look, you know that all the pros use cPanel.
Jesus. Well, just Chmod it 777 and own it by root everywhere. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. Go to do.co/LNL, that's for Late Night Linux, and you can get $100 credit to get you started, and you've got 60 days to use it. DigitalOcean offers VMs, or droplets as they call them, with full root access in data centers all over the world with super fast networking and super fast SSDs. They have pre-configured Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, CentOS, and even FreeBSD images, and also some container distros, CoreOS, Fedora Atomic, and Rancher OS. And they've got tons of one-click apps like LAMP and LempStacks, WordPress, Discourse, and GitLab. And these droplets start from as little as $5 a month, but you can scale them all the way up to ridiculous numbers of CPUs and amounts of RAM and storage. But if you need more storage for your particular droplet size, then it's really easy to add either block storage or object storage. You just decide how much you want, attach it to your droplet, and get going. I really love the backups, and I've actually had to use them before when I've made some mistakes because it was just quicker to restore the backup than it was to try and figure out what I'd done wrong. And do check out their blog, blog.digitalocean.com. They recently posted about Outline, which is a VPN, which is really easy to set up with DigitalOcean. It's just a few clicks, and it spins up the Docker container for you, and you've got a VPN going straight away, which these days more and more people find useful. I've been using DigitalOcean for years, and I've always recommended them even before they started sponsoring the show. So go to do.co/LNL and get your $100 credit. That's do.co/LNL. All right, well, let's talk about Wi-Fi and an LWN article that is currently paywalled, but hopefully won't be for too much longer. And IWD, which looks like the future of networking on the desktop.
Yeah, this is starting to look very interesting. WPA supplicant has been around for a long time now. It is mature, but it still has these sort of creaky edges, and it doesn't support every use case going. I don't think it's ever had a stellar reputation for being a reliable and full-featured piece of software. So it's interesting to see IWD come along with view to replace it. It is still fairly early days, and it's not IWD is not fully featured yet. There are still a few significant features missing, but it's heading in the right direction. It's already got support for Conman and Network Manager, and so it will be interesting to take it for a spin and to try it out. And so in 1904, we plan to enable Network Manager to work against IWD. And then allow people to install IWD and test it. It won't be the default, but who knows? For 2004, this could be the way that we go.
What's wrong with WPA's supplicant? Because I've never, ever had a problem with it. I mean, I don't have enterprise networks to deal with or whatever. I've just got a very basic setup, but I've just never had any problems. So I don't see why this needs to be replaced.
I think maybe you're in a minority. A lot of people have weird problems where WPA supplicant won't roam between network access points on the same network. It has trouble connecting to enterprise networks. I think it's just a bit of a muddle as far as I know. The code is quite complex and pretty unmaintainable. Well, that's not necessarily true, but it's certainly a large and complex code base, which could do with a bit of a refresh, I think.
Esoteric, shall we say.
Yeah.
Presumably this will be popping up in Arch very soon, Graham.
Well, actually, I've just checked. Yes, and it has, and I must give it a go. Maybe I can report back next time because it.
Yeah, not now.
No. Hold on a minute. Yay. Right. No. So it would be really interesting. I'd love to try it out, and maybe because I use Arch on a Mac, I do have all kinds of wireless issues. So it'd be interesting to see if they're helped at all.
Presumably, if it doesn't have an Ethernet jack, you're not interested, Phelim.
Well, ironically, the talk about enterprise networks, the time I've tried to use WPA supplicant clients and they have EEP and various weird setups with keys. I have literally had to just plug in the dongle to my laptop to get a network connection on a wire because I gave up after a while because it's just embarrassing, really. You're there going, I'll just type this in. Oh, it'll work any second now. Just, fuck, right. And then just plug it in and give up and just don't be modern.
I don't know, man. The best wireless in the world just cannot compare, can it?
Oh, no. Wireless is shite, let's face it.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, exciting hardware news then that Graham knew about beforehand and didn't bloody tell us, you bastard. A new Raspberry Pi, although it's not a very exciting Raspberry Pi, is it, to be fair?
No, maybe that's why I didn't know.
Wasn't worth it.
Well, no, I mean, it's great. And I'm sure that it fits a certain kind of, it's better in a revisionist way. And as I said, probably in that thing that you heard, I'm getting confused now by the number of Pis and the number of revisions to the hardware, which I think makes it difficult to maintain the clear, crisp image that the Pi Foundation tried so hard to maintain in the early days.
You are allowed to mention Bug Report. You can give it a good plug. What is it? Is it bugreport.co.uk or the Bug Report?
It's bugreport.co.uk. It's okay. We're keeping it a secret club.
Oh, right. Yeah. Fair enough.
It's a secret anti-EU club.
Yeah.
Wait, anti-EU? Oh, no.
Yeah. We're trying to win back that 52%, though.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, it's a slimmed down version of the 3B Plus, isn't it? This is now the 3A Plus or 3 Plus A, whatever. It's only got one USB port, I think, and smaller, but on half the RAM as well, crucially.
Yeah. That seems like a strange choice to me. The 512 meg. Obviously, I get it. It's a cost-saving exercise, but it feels like a limitation on that board that's really going to affect its usefulness.
Yeah. I don't see why you wouldn't just spend the extra $10 and get twice the RAM, personally.
But you would have more the power usage like that. I think remember when they first brought out the A Plus or A or whatever it was, I also get confused by them. They said the LAN jack uses up some ridiculous amount of electricity, like 200 milliamps or something. I don't know. So like cutting that out, if you're putting that thing in a box to take photos at nighttime on a battery, then you've already almost, well, no, okay, I'm not going to say you doubled it, your runtime, but you have increased it anyway.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense for certain use cases, but I think it's pretty niche use cases. But I think the real story here is that this is the final piece of this generation of Pis, and that we're going to see a new generation probably next year. I think I might have to put it in my predictions. None of you are allowed. And they're going to have to change the system on a chip to enable it to have more than a gigabyte of RAM. But there's that $35 cost. Now, I have heard rumors, and they are nothing but rumors, that there's going to be a version that is more than $35, which is kind of goes against what Eben has said in the past about wanting to keep it at that $35. But there might be like a premium version or something that's got 2 or more gigs of RAM, or maybe even 4 or something, and potentially proper networking that's not over the USB, wired networking that's not over the USB system. So who knows? It's all rumors at this stage, but we do know that this draws a line under this generation now, and we're going to see something exciting within months, probably. I don't know. I would have thought probably spring, based on what they've done before.
You sound optimistic.
Well, you sound pessimistic, Graham, and you've got the inside track.
No, I know absolutely nothing. I only know from talking. I haven't spoken to Evan and Ben about this for ages and ages, but they're always so stuck to that $35 price. And this has always been the number one question for like 5 years. What are you going to do to ramp up the next? Because everything needs to be changed. Everything that they've built towards making the Raspberry Pi in terms of the SoC has got to be different. They must have been designing it for a couple of years, but there's never been any clue of that. And things like this, you feel like they've got the silicon backed up in the factory. They're just going to use it. So I honestly do not know. I have no idea.
But they have got massive buying power, so they could potentially use that buying power that they've now built up to squeeze the cost down of something more powerful with more RAM. And so I'd like to think that they can keep it at the $35 and, innovate that little bit more, give you that bit more power. And crucially, I mean, that 1 gig RAM limitation in the main Pi, it's just too much to do much useful with, I think.
I thought a lot of these have been used in industrial sort of applications as well. So are they going to just sort of throw away that market that exists that could be funding towards the educational side? I mean, I know they're all about the education, but, if you have to sell millions of units and make a profit out of it, surely you wouldn't turn your back on that as well, or leave it to the knockoff versions like the Banana Pi or insert other names here, which I have no idea, but yeah.
Well, the thing is, they do keep making those old ones as well, don't they? I mean, I think they were still making the 2s for quite a long time after the 3 came out, because there are people who've designed products around them and they need them. And you've got the compute module as well, which is more suited to like seriously embedded stuff. So I think that they will keep making the previous generation once the new one comes out. But I suppose it's all just speculation at this point. But something that's not speculation is the new-ish version of Raspbian, which has got one killer feature as far as I'm concerned, and that is proper hardware acceleration in VLC. So even in the standard desktop version of it, you can actually watch videos now.
Yeah, this is very interesting to see. I've been trying to run Myth TV on a Raspberry Pi as a front end for a few months now, and it does use the hardware acceleration, and it's not been very good. The audio has lagged behind. It's had trouble syncing the video and the audio when it's output both things over the HDMI. That could be Myth TV, it could be the drivers, it could be the silicon, who knows. So I will be very interested to try and play back one of my recordings on the new version with this VLC that's built in or bundled with it, and see if I still have the same problems, because if I don't, then I know where to point the finger.
Why not KDE, Will?
I didn't like the KDE UI when I last tried it, which was 7 or 8 years ago. And the Myth TV one passed the Wi-Fi acceptance factor test. So that's what we went with.
Because I find the acceleration works really well in KDE. And with the Pi codecs as well, I even find it's got that 3D, because I quite like 3D films, it's got 3D acceleration, which you can't even do. I can't even do it on my i7 Nook plugged into the TV. So it does work well. And if you're using Myth TV as a backend, it works quite well with one of the PVR plugins in KDE.
What type of 3D is that?
Well, I do the huge. I own them, but like the rip of Blade Runner in 3D, for example, onto storage.
Is that 2 interlaced different frames, or how does that work? Do you know?
It must be interlacing. I did know exactly what it was doing, but it's the specific codec that decodes it is only for those kind of interlaced frames. So there must be a way of encoding them, the 2 scan lines together for each eye in the same frame.
That's bizarre.
Don't you feel like a bit of a dickhead though, sitting there with the glasses on?
Yeah, I now this is a bit off topic, I suppose, but I was really cynical about 3D for years and years and years. I really didn't get it, and I don't get it particularly. But when there is a good film in 3D, I just love it. I watch it in 2D and 3D too, but I think it was Seeing Gravity in the cinema that did it. It's just so immersive.
Did that help you get past the terrible storyline and lack of physics?
Oh no, I leave that to Interstellar.
Look, there's nothing wrong with using a fire extinguisher to get yourself around in space. It works perfectly.
Why are all those objects in the same orbit anyway? Because they're not. Oh, dear God.
It was good. I watched that on my projector. It was very good. Anyway, right then. So that's Raspberry Pi news. So new kernels revert Spectre mitigation. This doesn't sound good for security, but it does sound good for performance. Indeed.
I remember when Spectre first came out, I saw some graphs that Amazon, AWS, had put out showing, roughly 50% drop in performance for this sort of particular workload. And yes, I believed then, and I'm sure lots of other people did, that something was going to have to give. People would not be willing to sacrifice that performance if they could find a way to protect those machines, i.e. not hook them up to the internet or allow people to browse around on them, then they could probably opt not to have these fixes. And it seems that Linus has gone down the same sort of route of thinking and decided that for a lot of people, this is not really a necessity, and the performance impact is too severe to warrant being on by default. There are new fixes coming down the pipeline. A few, where are we? 4.20 will have these new fixes, and so for 4.19.4 and for 14.83, they have reverted these Spectre fixes and restored the performance.
So do we agree then that these attacks are theoretical enough and not real world enough to worry about versus the performance hit?
I guess it depends how you want to think of the risk factor here. If they are running services that are publicly accessible or even via a proxy, then yes, there's a big risk there. But if they're stuck away in a back office crunching numbers and no one on the internet is ever going to be able to touch them, and you trust your own internal staff, then yeah, you're probably going to be okay. The risk factor is a lot lower.
Because it is very specific workloads, isn't it? It's when you're hitting the network as well as the CPU at the same time that you get these 50% drops in performance. It's in kind of standard workloads. It's not anywhere near as bad as that, is it? So I think you do have to judge it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and I think if you are running those exact workloads, then you just be smart about where you deploy those machines and make sure that they are nice and secure, and then, yeah, switch this stuff off.
And possibly buy AMD processors.
Yeah, but they are still affected by some of this stuff, aren't they?
No, they're not. They're fine. That's why I just bought one, so it's fine. It's all good.
So, yes. So, I mean, do you come across this at work then, Phelim? I mean, these decisions of whether to deploy the fixes or not?
No, because that kernel's too high. No, because it's 4.15 is the highest one in 1804, and I always stick to the LTSs. So it will be sometime in early February, I think, when that comes out, which will be the hardware extended version for 1804 systems, and I'll probably still be on the upgrade path from 1604 anyway at that point. So, whether we stick with a LTS base kernel or go to the hardware extended support one, that'll be kind of probably tying into all that sort of stuff.
Right, I want an honest answer to this question. How many 1004 boxes have you still got access to?
0.
That's good. 1204?
0. No,
really?
0.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so everything's supported then?
Yeah, I guess it would, if you don't count that 1804 box that's still somewhere. Shh.
Damn it, I didn't go back early enough.
It's walled into a cupboard. I can't get to it. It's as close as.
All right, well, quickly wrapping up the news with Tomorrow's World special, which is on iPlayer and available for UK viewers, but not for you, Phelim, and not for the rest of the world.
Racist.
Yeah, Tomorrow's World was a show from the 80s and 90s, which looked at...
Much earlier, 1965.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't really around before that. So, yeah, it was looking at like future technology and whatnot. And this special was a 90-minute special that was on recently after being off air for over 10 years, I think. And it had loads of Ubuntu in it. So you demanded that we talked about it.
Well, yes, that's basically it. It was very interesting to see. So it was kind of a recap on, wasn't technology funny in the old days? And then they looked at some new technology, which was primarily self-driving cars and robots and, modern AI, ML kind of workloads effectively. And yes, it just so happens there was quite a lot of Ubuntu in there, which was very pleasing to see. But it raised the question for me about, is there a gap in the schedule for something like Tomorrow's World, which is a more sciencey approach to new technology? Because the programs we have at the moment, the Gadget Show, for example, which is distilled down to here is an app for your phone, and BBC Click, which is a bit more, middle of the road. I think I'll ask you guys, do you think that there is a gap in the market for something which is primarily about the science behind the technology, not about the whizziness of it?
I think that it would be interesting to see it, but I don't think there's a gap in the market for it. I think that people don't give a shit about that. And these days, they just want things that work. They just want an iPad, an iPhone, or, Android or whatever. They just want the thing to do the thing. They don't really care why it does the thing. And those who do care about that are more into like the Raspberry Pis and the hardware hacking and stuff like that. So there probably is a market for it, but I don't think it's a huge market. And probably online would be the place to do it rather than on old school telly.
I don't know if there's a market for programs about old antiques and ballroom dancing, which apparently there is. I'm sure there's some place for technology.
Well, the antique stuff during the day is so cheap to produce that's why they do it, because no one's watching it.
Well, how much would we charge? We wouldn't charge much.
Do we know anyone at the BBC? Let's put a pilot together.
We do it in a pub car park.
Very cheap to make.
I'll do the Synthy theme tune, BBC Radiophonics Workshop.
Yeah.
Take my money.
On to a bit of admin then. And first of all, thank you everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. Very much appreciated. Patreon has ticked up a little bit recently. That has not gone unnoticed. And remember that if you are willing to pay $5 a month on Patreon, you don't have to hear the adverts anymore. You can get an RSS feed for the ad-free episodes. Go to latenightlinux.com/support to find out about that. We even had a Bitcoin donation this week, which I still haven't got around to sorting out.
Well, hurry up, Joe, because it's devaluing at an astronomical rate.
Look, I've told you, buy now. It's going to go up. It always does. It kind of goes down a bit and then it goes up a bit and then it goes down a bit, but it always goes up. It's like house prices. Honestly, buy now and hodl. If you want to tell me how wrong I am about that, then you can go to latenightlinux.com/contact for various ways to get in touch with us. Okay, this episode of Late Night Linux is sponsored by CDN77. Go to cdn77.com/LNL. That's for Late Night Linux. And they are a UK-based CDN provider with a standalone live streaming platform. And apart from sponsoring loads of open source projects like CentOS, KDE, Fedora, and Gentoo, one of their main clients is the European Space Agency, who use CDN77 to deliver Hubble images all over the world. They're a real innovation leader. They were the first CDN to implement HTTP2 and Brotli compression. And everything's developed in-house, including their own DDoS protection. And they can push 80 gigabits of live streaming traffic through just one server through optimizations. And this CDN consists of over 500 servers all running Debian, and only a few of them are VMs. The vast majority of them are physical servers. And they've got 30 points of presence all over the world in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia, with over 7 terabits per second of network capacity in total. They've got excellent 24/7 live support, and you can either go pay-as-you-go or they've got monthly pricing plans. Either way, there's no commitments and no hidden costs. And if you go to cdn77.com/LNL, you can get a 14-day free trial with no credit card needed. And then if you do stick with them, you'll get an extra 10% on top of their first payment bonus. So go to cdn77.com/LNL and start delivering your content. You always seem to hear that the FOSS community is really toxic. And if you go to Linux, it's just like a toxic shithole, and like you should never go there. You should never read any comments or anything. But I'm not convinced that is true at all. I think it's the complete opposite of that. I think that the Linux and open source community are very forgiving and just have rose-tinted glasses about everything, basically. And what got me thinking about this is a couple of examples in the fairly recent past that I'm going to be very vague about and not be specific for obvious reasons, where members of the community have kind of made money from the community in not so above board ways, shall we say. And yet people seem to look the other way and just be very forgiving of that. And that got me thinking further on, well, it's not just when people do stuff wrong. It's the software in general. Like, is it not the case? I mean, we were talking about the WPA supplicant stuff where people have just put up with shit networking for ages just because it's open source. And okay, there are many, many examples of really solid open source software, most of which doesn't involve a GUI. But there's a lot of like really ropey shit Linux and open source software that just people put up with because they've got this goodwill. So, I mean, am I just completely wrong here? Is it full of toxic wankers, or is everyone just like really forgiving and hippie-ish deep down?
I think, as with all of these things, the truth lies somewhere in between. There are definitely the first group of people that you described, the R Linux people, definitely exist, and I tend to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. But similarly, the very kind and gentle and encouraging community does exist. It's whoever happens to be shouting loudest about any particular topic at that point in time, which is the one that everybody looks on and focuses on and says, oh, this is reflective of the entire community, which of course it isn't. So I don't know. The toxic element does exist. That is a certainty. Are there more of those? Probably not. Are they louder than everybody else? Yes.
It's funny that everybody uses R Linux as an example. I've never overly thought the comments on R Linux were that bad. And maybe it's just the ones I've stumbled into each time have always been relatively constructive. You'll always get the odd troll, but I mean, maybe just reading YouTube comments just for a laugh has sort of galvanized me to the fact that how bad human life can possibly be, that they just don't appear to be as bad as that. I think people go an awful long way to feel that they're not being constrained by something. So if you do happen to write a piece of software and it's not perfect and it allows you to get on and get by enough, I think people take an awful lot of pain before they're trapped in something like Windows 10 where, you know, depending on which upgrade you get, it breaks half your machine. I mean, it's not like the non-open world is much better.
That might be very true, actually, that people are just used to things being shit. And it's not just Linux and open source. And we at least have the advantage of it being all the good stuff free open source. You know, you can actually know what's going on with it. It's not got all hidden backdoors in it and stuff. So maybe I've just got expectations that are too high. I mean, I've spoken about it must be over a year ago, this idea that software having bugs is just wrong as far as I'm concerned. We shouldn't have that expectation, but we do. And I remember you shooting me down about that, Phelim, so we probably shouldn't open that can of worms. But yeah, I just seem to get this feeling that everyone isn't that bad in the Linux community. And you go outside of it and Jesus, man, there's some really terrible communities out there.
I also think there's a bit of a selection bias in the way we're talking about this. We're talking about people who are confident enough to express their opinions online. And there's lots of people that I've met, people like me in certain ways, that don't like expressing themselves online or don't want to get involved in R Linux or on Twitter in big discussions about things. And they seem to be a lot of the people that I meet and have met over my time in Linux and open source. And a lot of them are just wonderful, kind, considerate people, you know, just normal, regular people. And so discussions like this always seem to involve whoever's shouting the loudest. And there's always a lot of people who aren't saying anything who are, you know, just ordinary guys and girls.
The centrist, silent majority.
But equally, there's a certain kind of personality that likes Linux because of the technical aspects that it offered to them in the early days, and they really geek out over it. And they're the same kind of people who are maybe difficult to deal with online and express opinions that cause all kinds of arguments. And we have that as well.
But Will, you see the bad side of it every day. You must see the good side of it as well then.
Yeah, absolutely. Take the Yaroo community, for example. There's a group of guys, fairly small in number, who have produced an extraordinary piece of work through collaboration, and they talk to each other every day. They support each other. They offer critical feedback, but it's always taken in good faith. And it's an example of what can be done when a community of people get together around a sort of shared interest and a shared topic. So, yes, the community forums that exist on the internet, like Reddit and various discourse and, you know, forums and all of that kind of thing, are definitely a power for good. And it allows people to meet like-minded people to focus on similar projects. But yeah, as Graham said, the vocal minority seem to spoil it for everybody and seem to sort of enjoy hating on things. I think Mark said this in the past, that people just love to hate something, and that seems to be prevalent in the open source community in my experience, is aimed at Ubuntu. I'm sure that Fedora have their fair share of haters as well. And that whole approach to interacting with other people, just hating on whatever it is that they do, I guess it's commonplace everywhere in the world, but it just seems to be very pointed and very vicious around the open source community.
What about the idea that you have to be cruel to be kind, though, and that if you just put up with shit software and don't say anything about it, then it's never going to get any better? But, you know, okay, maybe sometimes or often or all the time people do it wrong in terms of how they tell you that it's shit, but maybe they should be more constructive. But just criticizing it for technical reasons isn't necessarily like a toxic thing, but I feel like it does often get labeled that just immediately.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, in my examples, I'm not talking about people with genuine feedback coming along and being told that they're trolling just because they disagree with everybody. I mean, these are people with literally no view about how things could be improved. They're there just to point out the fact that they don't like what you're doing and perhaps you should consider not doing it anymore. That's their entire goal.
KDE by default when?
Unity sucks.
Yeah. So the conclusion of this seems to be that I'm wrong and it's a false premise. It's a false dichotomy. It's not either everyone is a shithead or everyone is this, you know, rose-tinted glasses wearing idealist. It's somewhere in between and most people are just sort of normal.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The vocal minority ruining it as usual.
52%.
Yeah, 52% of them.
And I'd just like to say that in our Linux right now, the top post is that NASA uses KDE and it's a real VNC client logging into the InSight probe that just landed on Mars. So there you go.
Nice.
Very nice. Free software in space.
Well, somewhere in the loop anyway.
Yeah. Right, we should probably get out of here then. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. And then, is it one more until Christmas? I don't know. It's under a month till Christmas. I can't believe it. I'm getting so excited. Oh, I love Christmas, me.
I need to start shopping.
I don't, and that's why I love it. I just need to buy a couple of Amazon vouchers for the niece and nephew. And seriously, that's all I have to do.
Show you care with vouchers.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even get a physical one. I just email it to them. And
customize it? Nope.
No, exactly. And then I just sit and drink for 2 weeks. Well, I have to actually work quite a lot this Christmas, but it's stuff I love, so what are you going to do? Anyway, right, so we'll be back in a couple of weeks then. I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.